It's the difference between, working for a good company for years and, retiring and, having a modest living with a white picket fence and, 2.5 kids and a golden retriever.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Michael Beer, and alongside of me is my co-host, Ed Fletcher, and we're here to make you guys next up. Ed, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Michael. The weather's a little bit cloudy today.
A little bad, but okay. It is what it is.
Our guest today is the guy who runs an Instagram account called OverheardConnecticut. On his page, he chose to stay anonymous, so we're gonna keep it that kind of
that vibe
today.
I like it. I like it a lot. It's kind of mysterious. It's really cool.
So how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
All right.
I was mentioning to the guys before I just got off a work call that was like 3.5 hours long. So I'm recharging my batteries, but I'm happy to be here.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
That is brilliant.
So we're here today talking to the person who runs Overheard Connecticut. It's an account on Instagram. They have roughly 85,000 followers.
So that would be 88.
Okay, 88.8. Okay, perfect.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. It's 82. It's 82.8.
82.8.
I've lost around 10,000 followers after going on a hiatus for a year. So I never know where I am.
Right. So roughly 80,000 followers. He creates comedic posts regarding Fairfield County, which I think is really cool. So do you want to go a little bit more into depth as to what Overheard Connecticut is?
If I were to explain what my page is, it's a little satirical, but it's also a little, mockery, but it's also just, owning up to a couple different facts that, the world we live in Fairfield County isn't exactly the world everyone lives in, and just highlighting the things that people say that they think are normal that are actually really hysterical is a really funny thing. So, I go from, making fun of it to just being like, yeah, I said this, it's funny, I understand why it's funny, but I'm still like kind of who I am.
Right.
But yeah, I think that answers your question.
It's cool.
So to start off, we always ask the same question to every single podcast guest, and that is, what inspires you to make yourself next up?
What inspires me to be next up? I love to hear myself talk. And that is a great motivator in my life. It's the reason why I started a meme account. Attention is always a good thing. But I also, whenever anyone is reaching out to me for things like this, if it helps them, I think that's a win-win. These guys seem cool enough, and I thought that, this is a great idea, and more than happy to do so.
Cool. Yeah. So you're big on Fairfield County. Pages centered around Fairfield County.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are listening, Fairfield University students, you know what Fairfield County is. Anybody else who's listening, Fairfield County is one of the wealthiest counties in the world. So what would you say the culture in Fairfield County is? The
culture in Fairfield County. That's interesting. So obviously you have the wealth element where it's upper middle class to I would just say it's upper class people. A lot of the people we know are in the top 1% for earners or for net worth, and so with that comes a type of living, and then with that comes stereotypes, and it's just it can be very simply branded as just like kind of rich people doing their rich people things, but it's a lot more intricate than that. But it's hard. I don't know. It's some people label it as preppy. Other people label it as like snobby. I don't think that's really the case. It's extremely stereotypical, but in the same light is a lot different than people assume.
Right. So let me ask you a follow-up question. If you could summarize it in one phrase or one sentence, how do you think you would answer that?
Boy. I would say it is, I would say preppy is a good enough description. I wouldn't say it's completely accurate, but it's the closest thing to accuracy that we have, I would assume.
Right.
Gotcha.
So how does like isolated from reality work? You think
isolated? Oh, right. I did say that the first time. So I'm going to take that back, and I'm going to say isolated from reality, because we live in a bubble in Fairfield County. So the way that isolated from reality works is that just a function of growing up in a world where there is all this wealth and there's these ways that people live their lives. They forget after doing so for so long that the way they live their lives and the things that they do and the things they say are not even remotely close to what other people, and I would say 95% of the population would consider, a real person. And so it goes from everything from, there's that Arrested Development quote, like, oh, what's a banana, Michael? Like $20. And it's like, that is such a good description of what we are isolated from reality. The things that people think are crazy are normalities here, especially when it comes to money.
Yeah. I want to say, like, it's not really, for everyone who lives in Fairfield County that fits that stereotype, it's not really their fault, because
No.
they grow up with it and that's what they think is normal, when in reality the majority of the world is not even close to that level of like financial freedom. And
you're absolutely right. And it's funny. I mean, it's not exactly something. It's not the biggest cause to be ironed out and to be understood for us, anything. But you're absolutely right. People and kids and teenagers who grow up within that bubble, absolutely, I'm one of those kids. Nothing against that being the case. I mean, it is up to I guess their teachers and their parents and their mentors to make sure they're aware of how good they have it,
right,
and to give them a very good sense of reality so that they can benefit as much they can from being in a bubble like this without being a brat or someone who doesn't understand, how good they have it. I know we were talking the last time we spoke about, what's the difference between a kid who grows up in Fairfield County and someone who doesn't, and kind of what are the pros and what are the cons, because there are a lot of pros, but, like any situation, there will be cons. Obviously there's network, there's the people around you. It's just inherently easier to, get a job, get into a school, befriend people who, have a lot of money. What you lose is the grit that comes with being born into a place that doesn't have, access to these luxuries. And that's something, and it's really, I mean, compared to the other side, everyone would choose to be from Fairfield County, but just to kind of call a spade, that's really the only thing that people who are born here need to, work against, because they have all the other resources. They have all the other resources in their, that are opening all the doors for them. The only thing that keeps a lot of kids that I know, that I'm friends with, back is just the lack of drive to do so. Mm-hmm. Because either they see their parents or their friends' parents and they're like, oh, he's a CEO and she's a CEO and they have millions and millions of dollars. It seems super easy. I talk to them all the time. They're cool people. They don't realize that that's like really fucking difficult to do.
Right.
And then when they try and they fail, they're like, oh, I guess I'll just not do it. Whereas if you're born in like Bridgeport, or if you're from in New York or New Jersey, you know how hard it's going to be. None of your friends, or maybe only one of your friends, are like really well off, mm-hmm. and you're willing to put in that grind. You just don't have the access that these kids do.
Right.
So that's just the difference.
Yeah,
right.
It's basically either you, for the Fairfield County kids, it's you see what you have and you want to continue having that when you're older, or you mm-hmm. see what you have and you just kind of live off that and not really do anything.
Right, exactly. So going off exactly what you said, Ed, like, you see what you have and you want more of it. I would argue that people from the outside looking in would say it's a very materialistic culture, but I think the people on the inside aren't materialistic in the sense that when you work hard, you deserve to go buy a Lamborghini, and you can value that Lamborghini. And then when you're 12 to 16 years old and your father has a Lamborghini and you think it's the coolest thing in the world, and then you sit back and you're like, wow, I could do that too. So I think there's a drive in the way that it's like materialistic, but there's a little bit of a work ethic to get that too.
Well, it's definitely materialistic, but I understand kind of like the thought process that you're getting at. What I would say and what I would tweak what you were saying is that while it's definitely materialistic, you know, sure, if you grow up and your, you know, father or mother has like a really nice car and you're like, oh, I want to have that too. I would say most of the times, if you grow up with it and you think it's cool, there comes a time where like you no longer see those cars as cool, you know, or that's not as crazy to you. Mm-hmm. So it's not a driver anymore. I mean, sure, it's, you know, the older you get, if you really truly grow up with that around you, yes, you want it, but I would say it's almost more of a driver for people who like see it on the streets,
because like you already have it and you're like,
but what? So it's I would actually disagree. I would say it's extremely materialistic, but that doesn't negate from the philosophy that kids do get taught if they're taught correctly. Because I don't want to say that there are definitely kids in Fairfield County that are extremely materialistic who don't grow up the right way, that do not have the, you know, capabilities to continue on maybe like their parents' legacy, and that's always going to be the case. But you are absolutely right in the fact that there are, if your parents brought you up the right way, there's a philosophy behind what they did and what they built that will help you, and that other kids don't have access to. It's kind of like the whole, like if you read the Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of thing. It's the exact same thing. It's the mentality of like, you know, like buy assets, buy real estate, buy stocks, do things, get into building companies and leverage things. And it's the difference between, you know, working for a good company for years and, you know, retiring and, you know, having a modest living with a white picket fence and, you know, 2.5 kids and a golden retriever versus the Fairfield County, where it's like if your parents built businesses and really went on the limb at points in their lives, that's ingrained in you too. Whereas you do have the luxury of also thinking like that. So not only do you have the network and the ability to go do so, but you have the mindset, because the mindset's something that you can't buy that, and you can't obtain it easily. It has to be ingrained in you as a young age. And a lot of kids, you know, like I mentioned, you know, if their parents raise them the right way, they're going to be cementing that in their heads too. Like saying like, yes, work for a good company, you know, put in your time, be loyal, but also like there are opportunities that maybe don't present themselves right now, but if they do, take them, because that's how I got where I am. You know, so it's that risk factor. So yeah, it's a very multifaceted. You know, you have the material kids, you have the brats, you have the spoiled kids of the world who are never going to do that, and, you know, think a Lamborghini is a Toyota compared to them or whatever. Going to go back on their laurels and realize they don't have to work a day in their lives. But there will also be kids with, even if they have all that, the main thing they'll focus on is the philosophy, the work ethic, and the drive of how their parents got there. And it's almost a chip on their shoulder. You know, oh, you know, my parents have like $20 million in the bank. Like, they're really smart, but they raised me, and I know everything that they know now. Well, not really, but I know a lot that they didn't know. Mm-hmm. So like, I want to do like triple that or something like that. That's also there.
Yeah. So we touched on Fairfield County. We touched on like the background of your page. Mm-hmm. Where do you get all your content from? And can you explain your content to us?
Sure. My content, well, it started by, I don't think I explained how I started the Instagram page for people who don't know who I am. I first started it because I had a list of jokes and sayings and situations that I thought were hysterical, that either I heard or I just strictly came up with, and I put it in my notes folder in my iPhone. One day I was following a page. There was an Overheard on Wall Street, and then there was Overheard New York, and I realized, I was like, oh, let me send content I have to Overheard Connecticut, if there is one and it exists. And I searched it up, it didn't exist. I immediately, bought the domain. I made the Gmail account. I misspelled it the first time, and so I made another Gmail account, and I spelled it the correct time. I don't know which one I sent you guys. And then I made the Instagram. And from the get-go, I had about 100 quotes, which was a great platform to step off from, and I immediately just started using those. Some of them were things my friends said, their parents, and then some of them were just situations that I would take from, a couple paragraphs of dialogue in my head and kind of boil down as best I can to a sentence or two. And a lot of the times as I went on, I posted every day for 7 or 8 months, and that's a lot more than 100 quotes, obviously. After the 100, I really did do, 80 to 90% of the quotes were just me creating them strictly. So, I pull things from either pop culture or things I hear, and I just boil down to like 10 different ways to say one thing, and then I pick my favorite and hope it does well.
That's interesting. Yeah. Can you give us an example of like one of your favorite pieces of content?
My favorite, so I'd say it really boils down to the ones that did the best, honestly. Okay, actually no. There's a couple. There's the hangers are full and the hedges are funded, because I think that's just a great play on words, and I wanted to make a sweatshirt, honestly. There's my phone autocorrected here to Hermes. There's one that was stay away from my Mercedes, and it's like, all right, C-class, relax, kind of thing. And then I'm trying to remember. This guy was complaining. He's like, she's like a 6 out of 10 at best, and it's like the dad's like, her dad owns a sports team, she's a 10. And that one was taken from a friend's father, which hilarious guy. But the other ones, like the Mercedes one I made up, the Hermes one I made up, the hedges are full and the hangers are full and the hedges are funded. I didn't exactly make that one up. I just made it better.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really fun.
So they're just quotes that you hear walking around town that you're like, wow, that is absurd to say and hilariously funny.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to tell you that I walked around town and heard a quote. That's never happened. It's always just either I'm in a social setting. It's always a social setting. It's like I'm at a social setting, or I'm talking with my roommates, I'm talking with my friends, and just the situation allows itself for them to say a little bit of their Fairfield County-ness comes out, and they just trip over themselves and they say something really dumb or really stupid, and I write it down immediately, and then I just workshop it from there. Or sometimes I'll just be talking to myself. One day, I don't know, I think I was talking to myself, and I'm like, oh my, something about my Cartier or something, and I was immediately coming up with quotes about it. I'm like, Jesus, I need to stop doing this.
Yeah, it kind of becomes a natural reaction in your brain to start thinking.
Honestly, and if I'm gonna be honest, there came a point where it's me and my Instagram page were a little too closely related to each other, because I was so obsessed with it at a point where I needed to really just kind of take a step back and realize that's not it's a persona, it's something I do for fun and jokes, but it's not me really.
Yeah.
Right. This one, I got one right here. My mom flew our Florida housekeeper to Connecticut for a week to see how she does in a bigger house.
I actually got that one from someone, and she'll be very happy that it was read out right now. That actually did happen.
Yeah. So anybody who doesn't live in Fairfield County would be like, that is absolutely absurd.
Yeah. Not only is that absurd, it's stupid and pretentious, and they'd be right. It is.
Right.
But the what makes it funnier is anything can be pretentious, anything can be bratty or spoiled or preppy or rich or whatever, and it doesn't make it funny. What truly makes it funny is how crazy it is, but in the same light, that is a real thing that people who are seemingly intelligent was okay, yes, that is the logical next step to do. And honestly, in their situation, it's not the dumbest thing in the world, but it's still crazy.
Yeah.
It's still crazy.
Yeah, no, that's funny.
It's nuts. So, kind of a full 180 here.
Sure.
What's your craziest brand deal that you've gotten from doing this?
My craziest brand deal. I know of a couple of my friends who do run meme accounts who are bigger than me and have had crazy brand deals.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to say that I was paid like $10,000 to do something. I wasn't. What's been really nice is as you get bigger, I would say when I was hitting like 20,000 followers, I started to get brand deals, but they were mainly like, we'll give you our sweatshirt and then you can promote it. And you're like, I don't really want it. I want to get paid.
Right.
And then I got 50,000 up. They were actually paying me and they would actually just like agree to my rate, which was fantastic. And nowadays, I mean, I work with Hinge. I worked with a daily newsletter, The Coolest. I worked with a couple like offshoot companies. Christopher Cluse I work with now currently, and I think I mentioned Hinge. And what's great about them is they have an ad budget they need to spend, and they'll pay me like $100 or so to put up a story, and then they'll ask like, okay, how about we do 20 of them? And I'm like, perfect.
Works for me.
Perfect. Works for me. Literally, I started posting again, and they reached out to me when I was during my hiatus of like not posting for a year, and I would have loved to do that. I was like, listen, I'm not posting right now. I think it'd be a little disingenuous if I started doing ads and not doing any kind of content. I think that's just dumb. But like the second I'm back, I will hit you guys up, and I did. I hit them up a week or two after I started posting again, and no hesitation, they immediately asked for like a bunch more, which was perfect.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
Hoping to do more.
It's a great side hustle.
Brand deals are the craziest thing. Like,
it's so easy. It's so easy for me.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how much work do you have to do per like story that they ask you to put up?
No work at all. It's the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, that's.
It would be. You posted a story on your Instagram before.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's literally it takes 2 seconds for me. Sure, I have to take my Instagram profile from private to a business profile so I can swipe up. But then I put it right back to private. It's super easy.
Yeah.
The hard thing was the year of coming up with content, day in and day out.
Yeah, crazy. Okay, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Again, anonymous, no names, and we hope to make you guys next up.